The invitation was not addressed to Elias Morrow. It was addressed to Envoy-class diplomatic entity, Terran Prime. Elias read it 3 times, hoping it would transform into cultural attaché. Third substitute, please bring snacks. It did not. I think there's been a mistake, he told the docking officer as the shuttle latched onto the orbiting ring of Iller. The officer, a hovering construct of light and geometry, rotated politely. Statistical anomaly acknowledged. You are the highest-ranking Terran currently present. I alphabetize books for a living. You alphabetize civilizations, the construct corrected. That was marketing. The airlock opened before he could argue further. He stepped into the grand confluence hall, acutely aware that every pair of alien eyes had turned toward him. The Illyrians stood in ascending tiers, luminous fabrics threaded with living circuitry flowing around them like contained starlight. They looked almost human, which somehow made it worse. Almost human meant close enough to compare, and they were all comparing. At the center stood Valith Aranis. She was taller than him by half a head, posture unyielding, gaze steady. Her features were precise in a way that felt intentional rather than accidental. Only her ears, long, elegant, tapering past her dark hair, betrayed the difference outright. They angled slightly as she focused on him, as if tasting the frequencies of his heartbeat. A disembodied voice filled the chamber. The confluence of pairing begins. 3 figures stepped forward beside her. Each radiated a quiet certainty that made Elias instinctively check whether he had spinach in his teeth. Candidate 1, the voice intoned. Strategic commander, genome optimized for adaptive warfare. The commander inclined his head. Candidate 2, quantum architect, enhanced cognitive throughput. The architect's eyes flickered with internal calculations. Candidate 3, diplomatic heir, cross-factional harmonization metrics exceeding 98%. The heir smiled with curated warmth. Elias raised a tentative hand. I'm fairly certain I'm in the wrong line. A ripple moved through the chamber, not laughter, more like system error. Valith descended the steps toward him. You are not registered, she said. Story of my life. Her ears tilted forward. You are Terran. Yes, sorry about that. A faint shift in her expression, curiosity perhaps. You display no augmentation. I once had braces. Clarify. They were corrective dental alignment devices. She studied him as if recalibrating an equation. You were not designed for this. No one has ever accused me of that. The disembodied voice hesitated. High Scion, the approved candidates await genomic affirmation. Valith did not look away from Elias. State your function, Terran. I catalog stories, he said. My official purpose is to ensure we don't accidentally insult anyone's ancestors. And your unofficial purpose, he considered, to survive long enough to write about it. A silence stretched. Elias felt it pressing against his ribs. Candidate 1 stepped forward. High Scion, deviation from projected pairing reduces projected influence by 17%. 18, corrected Candidate 2. 17.8, murmured Candidate 3. Elias leaned slightly toward Valith. For what it's worth, I reduce most projections. Her ears twitched. You stand before the confluence uninvited, she said. Yes. You are statistically unremarkable. Painfully so. You are physically inferior to every candidate present. He glanced at the commander's shoulders, undeniably. And yet, she continued, your species persists. We're stubborn. Your history indicates repeated collapse followed by recovery. We're very stubborn. Murmurs threaded through the chamber. Candidate 2 projected a holographic spiral of DNA between them. Terran genetic drift is inefficient. Redundancy, mutation, uncontrolled recombination. Improvisation, Elias offered. The architect regarded him coolly. Inelegance. Jazz, Elias said. Valith's gaze sharpened. Explain. It's when you don't follow the plan structure exactly, he said. You adapt. Sometimes you hit a wrong note. Sometimes the wrong note becomes the song. The chamber's ambient light dimmed fractionally as deliberative systems engaged. Candidate 3 stepped closer to Valeth. Your union is not personal. It is foundational. The accord depends upon your optimization. Elias shifted his weight. I'm extremely non-foundational. Valeth circled him slowly. He resisted the urge to spin with her. You fear this hall, she observed, deeply. You cloak it with humor. It's cheaper than therapy. A faint sound escaped her, soft, abrupt. It took him a second to realize it was laughter. The chamber reacted as though a star had flickered. High Scion, the disembodied voice pressed. Please declare your selection. Valeth stopped in front of him. If I choose according to design, she said, our power increases predictably. Yes, intoned the candidates in near unison. If I choose according to calculation, she continued, our influence stabilizes. Yes, she looked at Elias. If I choose you, Terran, the projections fracture. I do that, he said gently. The silence now felt alive. Why are you here? She asked. Because someone misread a manifest, he replied. Because solar flares interfered with your docking grid. Because the universe occasionally forgets to follow instructions. Her ears angled outward, then slowly lifted. In a civilization perfected through intention, she said, voice carrying across the hall, an accident stands before us. Candidate 1's jaw tightened. Accidents weaken structures. Or reveal fault lines, Valeth countered. Elias swallowed. I'm very sorry. She faced the assembly. I choose the Terran. The words fell without tremor. The chamber did not erupt. It constricted. Predictive displays shattered into cascading error glyphs. Probability curves collapsed into static. The three candidates stood frozen as though awaiting correction. Elias blinked. I'm sorry, what? I choose you, she repeated. He glanced behind him. There's no one else here, is there? No. I feel obligated to inform you that I cannot lift heavy objects impressively. I am aware. I also snore. Her eyes held his. You are unengineered. Hopelessly. You are unoptimized. Tragically, you are unpredictable. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me today. A low surge of voices rippled through the tiers. The disembodied voice attempted composure. High Scion Valeth Aranes, confirmed deviation from genetic accord protocol. I confirm. State reasoning for the record. Valeth did not look away from Elias as she answered. Strength without adaptation becomes fragility. Intelligence without uncertainty becomes arrogance. Power without choice becomes prison. Elias leaned slightly toward her. For the record, I make terrible coffee. I will endure it, she said. Security constructs shifted uneasily. Counselors exchanged alarmed glances. Candidate 2 stepped forward sharply. This destabilizes generational planning. Correct, Valeth replied. Candidate 3's voice cooled. You jeopardize supremacy. I redefine it. Elias exhaled slowly. This is the part where someone escorts me out, yes. No, Valeth said. Her hand extended toward him. The chamber held its breath. Elias looked at her hand, then at the sea of disapproving brilliance surrounding them. I was supposed to be observing, he murmured. Now you are participating. He placed his hand in hers. Somewhere above them, an ancient algorithm failed to compute the future. And for the first time in centuries, the confluence did not know what would happen next. Elias learned 3 things within the first hour of being chosen. First, Illyrian walls listened. Second, Illyrian floors adjusted temperature according to emotional volatility. Third, there were now at least 9 governmental subcommittees dedicated entirely to the problem of him. He stood in what he had been assured was a temporary transitional accommodation, which felt suspiciously like dignified containment. A hovering lattice of light projected rotating strands of his DNA in front of him. Please remain still, said a calm voice from nowhere and everywhere. I'm not moving. You are blinking at irregular intervals. That's called panic. Clarify. I would, but I'm busy blinking. The strands of light pulsed. Terran genome displays excessive stochastic variance. Thank you, I try to stay hydrated. A panel slid open and Valeth entered without ceremony. The projection dimmed instantly. You dismissed them, Elias asked. I outrank them. Convenient. She approached the hovering helix. They are attempting to quantify you. Good luck to them. They will not find what they expect. I rarely do. Her ears shifted slightly, angling toward him. He had begun to recognize the gesture. It meant she was focusing in ways that made lesser beings reconsider their life choices. You are unsettled, she said. Yes. You regret accepting. I didn't exactly accept, you declared. I was still processing. You could have withdrawn your hand. He considered that. That would have felt rude. This decision alters interstellar equilibrium. I once altered equilibrium by tripping into a buffet table. This feels similar. Her mouth curved faintly. Your humor is inefficient. It's defensive. Against what? Expectations. She studied him in silence. A chime resonated through the chamber. Emergency council session initiated, announced the omnipresent voice. High Scion Valeth Aranes and Terran selection required. Elias straightened. Ah, the execution. Clarify. Figurative, I hope. Valeth turned toward the exit. They will attempt to reverse my declaration. Can they? Not legally. That's not reassuring. They entered the council sphere together. Tiers of Illyrian officials surrounded a central field of suspended data. Charts, predictive matrices, generational lineage maps, entire futures rendered in luminous geometry, hovered in agitation. One elder counselor stepped forward. High Scion, we request procedural clarification. You have it, Valeth replied evenly. You selected outside approved genomic parameters. Yes. You selected without compatibility simulation. Yes. You selected a species with no accord integration. Yes. Elias raised a hand. In my defense, I integrate moderately well with coffee. No one laughed, Valeth did. The elder counselor's gaze sharpened. Terran, you comprehend the magnitude of this deviation. Only vaguely. I assume it's larger than my student debt. A younger counselor projected a cascading probability curve. Projected offspring exhibit diminished physical resilience compared to established Illyrian baselines. Elias leaned toward the projection. Diminished compared to engineered super-soldiers. That feels like an unfair benchmark. Comparative standards maintain supremacy, the counselor replied. Supremacy of what? Elias asked. Winning hypothetical wars against hypothetical threats. A murmur rippled outward. Valeth's ears lifted higher. Continue. Elias blinked at her. Continue. You have begun a line of reasoning. Finish it. He swallowed. On Earth we optimize things too, crops, systems, economies. And every time we optimized too narrowly, something unexpected broke it. A fungus, a market shift, a new idea. Diversity wasn't elegant, but it kept us alive. A senior geneticist interjected. You equate biological purity with fragility. I equate predictability with blind spots. The chamber dimmed fractionally as deliberation algorithms recalculated. Valeth stepped into the central field. For centuries, we have paired to eliminate weakness. That is correct, said the elder. And in doing so, she continued, we have eliminated variance. Variance introduces instability. Variance introduces adaptation. A sharp exchange of glances passed through the tiers. One counselor turned to Elias. Terran, what qualifies you to speak on adaptive resilience? He hesitated. Nothing official, but my species survived ice ages, plagues, global wars, environmental collapse, and reality television. A pause. Clarify the last, the counselor demanded. You don't want that data. A flicker of subdued laughter broke somewhere in the upper tiers. The elder counselor gestured sharply. Humor does not constitute policy. No, Elias agreed. But fear shouldn't either. Silence tightened. Valeth looked at the suspended projections. What do your models predict if I rescind my choice? The data shifted. Stability restored, replied the system. And long-term. A brief hesitation. Projected societal rigidity increases by 47%. And vulnerability to novel threats. The projection wavered, uncertain. Elias exhaled softly. Uncertain is my natural habitat. Valeth turned to him. Does this attention overwhelm you? Yes. You may withdraw. He looked around the chamber at the luminous faces, measuring his worth like a flawed equation. If I withdraw, he said quietly, what happens? You return to observational status. The confluence proceeds as intended. And you? I proceed as designed. He met her gaze. And do you want that? He asked. A stillness passed between them that felt denser than the chamber's gravity modulation. No, she said. The elder counselor raised a hand. High Scion personal preference is subordinate to civil architecture. Perhaps, Valeth replied. Our architecture requires revision. A low wave of disapproval surged. Elias cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I don't think I'm superior to anyone here. I'm not stronger. I'm not faster. I definitely can't calculate quantum probabilities in my head, but I know how to fail and try again. Repeatedly, with embarrassing persistence. You frame mediocrity as virtue, the geneticist said. I frame resilience as experience. Valeth stepped beside him. This is not a rejection of strength, she said to the council. It is an expansion of it. The elder's voice hardened. You gamble the future of our lineage. Valeth's ears angled forward, unwavering. No, I choose it. The chamber's systems pulsed brighter, as if straining under competing directives. Finally, the omnipresent voice spoke. Genetic Accord Protocol recognizes the authority of the High Science declared selection. Override impossible without formal deposition. A collective intake of breath followed. Elias leaned toward Valeth. Deposition sounds unpleasant. It is. Good, I prefer avoiding it. The elder counselor lowered his hand slowly. This matter is not concluded. No, Valeth agreed. It has begun. As the session dissolved into controlled unrest, Elias felt the weight of a civilization pressing against him. He glanced at Valeth. Out of curiosity, he murmured, is there a handbook for surviving political upheaval in advanced alien societies? No. Excellent, I was worried there might be homework. Her lips curved again. Around them, projections recalculated futures that no longer aligned neatly. And for the first time, uncertainty was not an error. It was an active variable. By the third day, Elias had been scanned, mapped, profiled, debated, translated, misinterpreted, and gently threatened in 4 dialects. He was beginning to miss being irrelevant. You are trending, announced the ambient interface in his quarters. That sounds contagious. Your image has been replicated across 9 major data streams. Please tell me I look dignified. There is a subthread analyzing your blinking frequency. I knew that would come back to haunt me. A soft chime preceded Valeth's entrance. They are not accustomed to uncertainty, she. Trial 3, the array declared. Continuation. A new scenario emerged. Expansion trajectories plotted across neighboring systems, some uninhabited, some harboring pre-warp civilizations. Directive, the array prompted. The Queen spoke first. Continue expansion at moderated pace, strategic annexation. I hesitated. If we expand into pre-warp systems, I said, we destabilize emerging cultures. They will advance regardless, she replied. Then let them do it without us hovering. And surrender influence. Yes, the chamber quieted further. You would limit empire growth, she asked. I would redefine it. How? Partnerships, observation accords, shared technology only upon request. The Chancellor made an audible noise of horror. Naive, he said. Possibly, I replied, but sustainable. The array processed. Long-term projections unfolded. Slower territorial expansion under my model, reduced conflict incidents, increased diplomatic networks. Under hers, robust territorial control, higher resource intake, elevated probability of large-scale war in distant futures. The projections dimmed. Right analysis complete, the array intoned. My pulse thudded in my ears. Preliminary conclusion: Challenger and Sovereign exhibit complementary governance architectures. I blinked. That sounds inconclusive. It is not. The Queen stepped closer. State the outcome, she said. Neither model demonstrates categorical superiority, the array replied. Optimal empire viability achieved through integrated directive framework. The chamber reassembled around us. The nobles erupted into layered whispers. So, I said slowly, no one dies. Correct, the array said. I sagged slightly. Excellent. I was not emotionally prepared for heroic sacrifice. The Queen regarded me, something unreadable in her expression. You would have relinquished expansion, she said. Yes. You would have weakened us. I would have changed you. A pause, and you, I asked, would you have accepted defeat? Her long ears lifted slightly. I invoked the right, she said. I was prepared for its answer. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So what now? I asked. The High Chancellor stepped forward. Now we determine how to implement integration. I looked between them. I was joking about ruling, I said. The Queen's gaze did not waver. I was not, she replied. The court did not erupt, it recalculated. That was worse. No shouting, no dramatic denunciations, just a shifting of posture, a ripple of whispered data passing through embedded implants, and a collective realization that tradition had just updated its firmware. The Queen lifted her hand. Silence restored itself instantly. The right has spoken, she said. The High Chancellor inclined his head the precise degree required to signal obedience without enthusiasm. The array's conclusion recommends integrated governance, he said carefully. Clarification of implementation parameters is required. That, I muttered, sounds like a polite way of saying no one knows what to do with me. You will refrain from muttering, the Chancellor replied. I wasn't aware muttering required authorization. The Queen's ear twitched. You will stand beside me, she said, addressing both the court and me. Not as sovereign, not as subject. As counterweight. I blinked. That is not a reassuring title. It is an accurate one. The array projected data threads between us. Decision matrices, probability branches, governance nodes. Integrated directive framework will require dual authentication on expansion initiatives, it announced. Resource allocation algorithms will incorporate Challenger heuristic weighting. Heuristic weighting, I repeated. I've been turned into a setting. Yes, the array confirmed. I looked at the Queen. You're comfortable with this. She met my gaze evenly. I invoked the right because certainty has become dangerous. Certainty built this empire. And may yet end it. The Chancellor stepped forward again. Your Radiance, with respect, expansion has secured stability for 3 centuries. And increased external threat vectors by 42%, she replied without looking at him. He hesitated. I raised a hand slightly. May I ask a potentially foolish question? You have established a pattern, the Chancellor said. Encouraging. The Queen gestured for me to continue. If the right concluded that integration is optimal, I said, why has it never happened before? A pause, the array answered. Previous rights produced decisive superiority in one governance architecture. So either the Challenger lost badly, I said, or the Sovereign did. Yes, and the loser. Outcome varied. That's ominous. The Queen spoke quietly. No prior sovereign has faced this degree of systemic inflection. In other words, I said, your empire is at a crossroads. Yes, and instead of conquering your way through it, you dropped your crown in front of a visiting human. Yes, when you phrase it like that, I said, it sounds reckless. Her lips curved faintly. It was calculated. The nobles shifted uneasily. One stepped forward, a senior counselor, if the density of ornamentation was any indicator. Your Radiance, she said. Integration with an external species introduces instability. I am standing right here, I said. You are evidence, she replied coolly. Of what? Unpredictability. Correct, I said. That's the point. The Queen's ears angled forward. Instability is not inherently detrimental, she said. Stagnation is. The counselor inclined her head but did not retreat. Will the human possess veto authority? She asked. The array pulsed. Expansion initiatives beyond designated thresholds will require consensus between sovereign and counterweight, it stated. I stared at the projection. Consensus meaning we both agree. Yes, and if we do, action deferred. A murmur rippled outward. You are granting paralysis, the Chancellor said. No, the Queen replied. I am granting deliberation. I cleared my throat. For the record, I do not intend to block everything. I enjoy progress. I simply prefer it, without galactic-scale collateral damage. Your species industrialized its homeworld to ecological brink, the counselor said sharply. Correct, I replied. We are excellent cautionary tales. A faint sound escaped the Queen, almost a laugh. The tension thinned slightly. The array projected a new data set, external threat assessments, emerging civilizations, internal dissent probabilities. Integrated governance reduces projected large-scale war probability by 17% over 2 centuries, it announced. 17, the Chancellor repeated. Marginal. 17% of billions is not marginal, I said. Silence followed. The Queen stepped down from the elevated platform and stood beside me rather than above. That subtle shift did more than any declaration. Gasps softer this time. You will retain your title, I said quietly to her. Yes. And I will, what? Sit in meetings and suggest fewer invasions. You will challenge assumptions, she said. I already do that. You will do so with authority. That feels dangerous. For whom? Everyone, I admitted. She nodded slightly. Good. The Chancellor straightened. If this integration proceeds, formal codification is required. The counterweight must swear adherence to imperial continuity. I frowned. Define continuity. Preservation of the empire's core identity. And who defines that identity? A pause, the Queen answered. We will. The Chancellor did not look pleased. An aide approached with a small device, an oath interface if the glowing sigils were any indication. Place your hand upon the conduit, the Chancellor instructed. I stared at it. Before I do that, I said, I have one condition. The chamber stiffened. You are not in a negotiating position, the Chancellor warned. I disagree. The right positioned me quite specifically. The Queen watched me, unreadable. Speak, she said. No expansion into pre-warp civilizations without explicit, measurable evidence of existential threat, I said. Observation only. No annexation, no resource extraction. The nobles reacted immediately. Preposterous. Strategic suicide. Naivete. The Queen did not speak. The array processed. Projected resource deficit increase. 5% over 50 years, it stated. Projected conflict reduction. 11% over same period. The Queen's ears tilted slightly outward. You ask us to relinquish opportunity, she said. I ask you to redefine it. And if those civilizations become hostile, then we reassess, I replied. Together. Silence stretched. The Chancellor looked ready to combust. Finally, the Queen extended her hand, not to the oath device, but toward me. Agreed, she said. The chamber erupted in layered shock. You concede too much, the counselor protested. I concede nothing, the Queen replied calmly. I invest in longevity. She turned to me. Place your hand on the conduit. I did. The device flared, light threading around my wrist. State your directive alignment, the array prompted. I took a breath. I commit to the preservation of life over territory, to deliberation over impulse, and to challenging this empire when it forgets why it exists. The conduit pulsed. The Queen placed her hand atop mine. I commit, she said, to sharing authority where certainty once ruled. The device brightened, then dimmed. Oath integration complete, the array announced. The Chancellor exhaled slowly, as if accepting an unpleasant but irreversible software update. I looked at the Queen. "So," I said quietly, "what happens now?" She regarded the court, then the vast projections of empire spanning stars. "Now," she said, "we begin arguing properly." I smiled despite myself. "Finally," I replied, "something I'm qualified for." The first time I vetoed an expansion proposal, 3 admirals resigned. Not dramatically. No public protest. They simply submitted formal notices citing philosophical incompatibility with revised imperial trajectory. I framed one of the notices. The Queen did not. "You are enjoying this too much," she said as we reviewed the aftermath. "I enjoy surviving," I replied. "It's a new hobby." We stood before the array's latest projections. Trade routes had begun to shift. Instead of military corridors pushing outward, diplomatic envoys now moved along exploratory vectors. External response? I asked. "Mixed," the array said. "Neighboring powers interpret policy shift as either weakness or strategic reconfiguration." "Let them guess," I muttered. The Queen's long ears angled slightly toward me. "You are less reactive than before," she said. "I used to think everything required immediate action," I admitted. "Now I've learned that sometimes the most radical move is waiting." She considered that. "The Council resists you," she said. "The Council resists change," I corrected. "I just happen to have a face they can blame." A subtle shift of her posture. "You carry their hostility lightly." "I don't," I said. "I just joke about it." That earned the faintest curve of her lips. Months passed. We argued daily: fleet distribution, AI citizenship, energy redistribution to neglected sectors. Each disagreement felt less like opposition and more like refinement. "You still prioritize morale metrics over industrial output," she said during one session. "And you still assume industry guarantees loyalty," I replied. "History supports my position. History also contains revolutions." Her ears flicked. "You enjoy reminding me." "I enjoy keeping you slightly uncomfortable." "And I," she said calmly, "enjoy challenging your optimism." It was not hostility, it was balance. The first true test came sooner than expected. A border system reported anomalous activity, not invasion, not yet. A neighboring coalition had begun aggressive resource harvesting in disputed space. The admirals, those who remained, recommended preemptive military action. "Demonstrate strength," one urged. "Reassert deterrence." The council murmured in agreement. I looked at the Queen. She looked back at me. "This is where you caution restraint," she said quietly. "Yes. And risk emboldening them. Or we redefine the engagement." The array projected possible outcomes. Preemptive strike, high short-term dominance, elevated long-term conflict probability. Diplomatic engagement, uncertain short-term stability, reduced escalation risk. The Queen addressed the admirals. "If we strike first," she said, "we validate their suspicion that our policy shift is camouflage. And if we do nothing," an admiral countered. "We will not do nothing," I said. "We will open a channel." Laughter thin and skeptical. "You believe words will halt extraction fleets?" the admiral asked. "I believe incentives might," I replied. The Queen stepped forward. "Prepare defensive formations," she ordered. "Visible but non-aggressive. Simultaneously, initiate diplomatic contact." A compromise, not dominance, not passivity. The tension in the chamber tightened. "You are risking imperial reputation," the Chancellor said. "No," the Queen answered. "We are redefining it." Negotiations were not swift. They were not graceful. There were accusations, historical grievances. A particularly heated exchange involving a misinterpreted star map and 3 centuries of misplaced blame. At one point I muted my channel and leaned back. "I miss simple mining contracts," I muttered. "You never truly wanted simplicity," the Queen replied. She wasn't wrong. Weeks later, the coalition agreed to shared access protocols. Resource extraction limited. Joint oversight established. No fleets fired. The admirals did not resign this time. The array updated its projections. Large-scale conflict probability reduced by 9%, it announced. I smiled faintly. 17% was better, I said. The Queen glanced at me. You measure success in percentages. I measure survival in increments. She grew quieter over time, not withdrawn but reflective. One evening cycle, after the council dispersed, she remained seated beside me rather than returning immediately to her private chambers. You have altered more than policy, she said. That sounds ominous. You have altered me. I looked at her. How? I once believed certainty was strength, she said. Now I understand that doubt when structured is resilience. I let that settle. I used to think power meant control, I said. Now I think it means responsibility for consequences you can't fully predict. Her ears angled toward me, attentive. You are no longer reacting, she observed. No, I agreed. I'm choosing. Silence lingered. The crown rested between us on the central table during strategic sessions now. Not always on her head, not always absent. It had become less symbol and more reminder. One cycle, the High Chancellor approached me privately. You have not attempted to usurp, he said. Was that an option? I asked. Given precedent, it was plausible. I don't want your throne, I replied. I want your empire to survive long enough that mine can learn from it. He studied me for a long moment. You are inconvenient, he said. I've been told. But not destructive. I try. He inclined his head just slightly and left. That felt like victory. Years passed. Expansion slowed but did not cease. It transformed. Observation accords multiplied. AI entities gained formal representation. Resource extraction balanced against restoration initiatives. Not utopia, not perfection, but trajectory mattered more than illusion. One day, standing before a projection of newly charted space, I turned to the Queen. If you hadn't dropped it, I said, would you have changed course? Her answer came without hesitation. No. And now? Now, she said, I would not choose certainty over challenge. I exhaled slowly. I almost didn't pick it up. Her ears lifted slightly. But you did. Yes. We stood in silence for a while. I was afraid of losing my life, I said. And now, she asked, now I'm more afraid of losing perspective. She regarded me steadily. That, she said, is growth. A new transmission arrived. An emerging civilization requesting guidance rather than conquest. I smiled. Looks like we're being asked instead of feared, I said. The Queen placed the crown upon her head not as assertion but as acknowledgement. Then let us answer, she said. I nodded. Not as challenger, not as subordinate. As counterweight, as partner. As someone who had once bent down out of reflex and stood up responsible for more than himself. I had come seeking minerals. I remained to safeguard futures. And for the first time since the crown struck the floor, the silence in the court no longer felt engineered. It felt chosen.